Forbes India and Indeed present Top 30 Talent Leaders of 2024.
We have a very distinguished panel sitting here with us, and I can't wait to start today's discussion. I have a common question to begin with for each of our panelists. Over the years, how do you think talent attraction, talent management, and employer branding has changed over the years? I think on this note, we'll be able to set the context of our conversation for today's panel discussion. Starting with you, Devleena.
Okay, thanks for that, Neha. So first and foremost, I must admit, that academia tends to be probably a decade behind industry practice. So that's, a caveat that I'm putting out right out there. We eagerly follow what, industry does, and we try to see, that does it make sense? Is it valid? And all of that stuff. But clearly, AI and tech is shaping every aspect of talent management, right from applicant attraction to selection, screening, customization of careers at an individual level, that hyper-personalized experience, customized learning programs. I think that way, the whole efficiency across the entire HR function has improved. HR is now doing much higher order work, what Dave Ulrich talked about. So that's clearly happening. While a lot of things have changed, I think some challenges still remain. So the war for talent still continues. We still struggle to find good people, retain good people. Employee engagement, expectations just never cease to amaze. And we still struggle to keep people happy. So I think as tech has changed the ways we work, I think some of the problems still remain the same.
Do you agree, Sunita?
Absolutely, because if you really look at the way tech has really changed our thinking, Devleena and I were just exchanging notes, and by the way, she's ex-Wipro too, and we were just comparing notes from the time when she was there to today and what all has changed. And I must say, there is a huge nudge that AI has brought into even the functional space. And of course, I think the pandemic also taught us a lot of lessons. And I feel a lot of change in organization thinking with respect to just, remote, and as a result of which the spend that companies do in terms of digitalization has significantly gone up. So I definitely agree.
Yogi, would you like to add to that?
Yeah, one is that when you talk about the talent market, how has it changed? The concept of the workplace itself has changed. Home, office, under a tree, in a club, all that seems to be merging. Also, the types of workers that we have now in industry, whether it's FTE, contracts, gig workers, neo-gig workers, all that has changed a lot. The third is, what is longevity now? I mean, longevity and the attitude of being loyal to a company, that norm is also rapidly changing, and one can't blame youngsters because they see sometimes in different countries parents being laid off and stuff. AI in recruitment, as Sunita and Devleena have talked about, has played a big role. Indeed is a very good example of how it has really changed the market. I think it's become now a seller's market as compared to a buyer's market. When I was looking for a job way back, it was more of a looking for a job. Now people chased good talent. Social media has had a huge role. And I think the world now today is moving towards niche domain skills. Things like 9-box models and all that are off. So, leadership is everywhere. It's not sitting in the 9th box when you look at the boxes. Companies have started listening more than talking. PPTs have got replaced by listening to what students are saying, what young people are saying, and so on. And I think in India, there's a major reshuffle in the labor market. If you go out to recruit in the engineering colleges, you find that there's a gravitation, good or bad, towards computer science. Admissions in the traditional fields such as mechanical, electrical, electronics, chemical are drying up. And finally, things like engagement wasn't heard of when the talent market was really being, in focus, say 20 years back and so on. Today, engagement is a big thing. It's one big thing.
So as Yogi was saying, there is leadership everywhere. Companies have started listening. What do you want to add to that, Rohan?
Let me start by saying I probably can't speak from a recruiter or a HR team perspective any better than what's been answered till now. So I'm going to take the other approach. I'm going to talk from a job seeker's perspective. I think realistically, and to add to what Yogi sir was saying about longevity, I think everyone's a job seeker at this point in some way. We've just not been inspired enough, or better still, we've not yet lost patience at work enough to look for the new job. But everyone is always looking for jobs, and I think the biggest thing that has changed across the border, and we've done cross-generational research on this, is the fact that everyone's expectations of a job have shifted significantly, right? And the thing that, and I think Devalina ma'am hit the nail on the head with that word, hyper-personalization. I don't want to go work at an organization, and not me personally, but what job seekers are saying is where there is a one-size-fits-all kind of approach to it. It doesn't work for me. So if you can't cater to my needs, I'm going to go find someone who can. And that's true from an employee experience perspective, and we're starting to see that from a candidate experience perspective also. I think a lot of the times we have focused on building a process and standardizing that we tend to push people out of the system, even if they're the right people for the job. And that's where tech can play a role, or it can also be a bad thing. Tech can also do its part in filtering people out. But I think that's one of the things that is constantly changing. And hyper-personalization will allow us to also cater to changing needs. If the policies are flexible, then you don't have to think about changing the policy every time. So that's one of the biggest changes.
Devlin, I'll bring you in the conversation at this point. He spoke about hyper-personalization. How do you think this can be incorporated in talent management? What are some changes you are seeing? And what do you think would be some important factors, checks and balances to keep in mind to ensure that this doesn't become a problem where there's too much focus on hyper-personalization?
Yeah, so, while today each one of us gets our LinkedIn feeds and our Netflix feeds and Amazon feeds, which is hyper-personalized for our own consumption. Company offerings tend to be, as you rightly said, tends to be a one-size-fits-all. So this is where AI and tech is really helping, based on the analytics, predictive analytics. It's kind of telling a certain demographic or a certain segmentation works, and therefore this is the value proposition that you need to go to. It's telling recruiters what benefits should be pitched right from the recruitment. What do you do from from a learning and development perspective? See, the era where when I started my career, managers told us what's our next job. Today, I think that era has passed. You can't tell the new generation what roles to take up. They're chartering their own path. They just look to organizations to say, okay, how are you going to help me get there? Show me the roadmap. And therefore, what's coming in, especially on learning and development, is how do you show that visibility? And that's where tech is playing a big role. Bringing in the transparency of opportunities, bringing in the transparency of skills and competencies, tech-enabling assessments, and letting people see, how far they are from maybe a moonshot role, or maybe from the next role, or a horizontal role, even in managing their careers. Benefits is clearly one place where hyper-personalization has been implemented in a big way. But all of this actually brings in challenges for HR. Right? I mean, HR is a custodian of being, fair and transparent and equitable. I mean, that's our basic duty. Now, how do you do that and still tweak the rules and still say we're being fair? I think that's the dilemma that this audience is probably also facing, right?
Sunita, to take this forward, we've been talking about hybrid work structures. How do you design and implement a structure that addresses, mitigates the question of burnout, brings about better work-life balance. But at the same time, as Devlina also pointed out, the perspective of HR is always to be fair and balanced, keeping in mind the goals of the organization and the employee. Have you found the solution to that?
So, it's a question of you have to, it's because I think the expectation from this generation is such that I want things in this way, in this time frame, with this kind of combination. And if the organization is not able to offer it, then there are choices that they make. And by the way, Yogi just talked about it. Look at the market and look at the kind of jobs and look at the kind of skill sets that are required and the gaps that we see in the skills available. So to that extent, I think we've come a long way, and I feel the pandemic was also a great teacher here because people experienced what it was to work completely from home, and they did experience, along with it, along with the flexibility came, of course, the other side of it with respect to no social contact, touching, feeling, the emotional connect, the social support that I required. So the moment, I can actually narrate a story. I went to one of my offices, and this was, during the time when people were still not coming back full force. And just the fact that there was a note that went out to the team saying, hey, there is this leader coming in, and, she would like to meet with all of you. And I see this woman, running into the lift and saying, you're Sunita Cherian? I said, yeah, I've come to the session that you've called for. And I said, good, come in. And she was explaining, she said, thank God you sent out that note asking me to come to office. And I said, but why? She said, no, because my family just expects that I will sit at home, cook, take care of the family, etc., etc. That's work from home. So thank you for sending out that note, because now I can show it to them and say, hey, I also have a life in terms of going to work, meeting with people. So I think the burnout was real. And I think organizations did step up in terms of trying to mitigate that burnout, be it in terms of the mental well-being and the efforts that went behind it, or for managers to just up the antenna, to just ping people to say, hey, how are you? I don't want to know anything else. Just that social connect, just that going beyond what the work entailed, and just to have a more personal touch with individuals was important. So long story short, Neha, I think organizations have to figure out a way in terms of catering to different needs of people. And I think tech is helping us a big way in it, because I can at least speak for Wipro. This is something that we are implementing, and we're seeing the benefits of it. So it's a little tricky in terms of how do you really formalize it. But I think once you have the secret sauce, I think it works fine.
What's the secret sauce?
So I think it's practice. It's about how do you see what's important for your people. So are you listening enough, like Yogi said? Because if it's more of, this is my policy and this is the way I want to do it, if you come from that kind of a standpoint, then I don't think there is any sauce, right? So it's all about listening to what people want. Are you truly asking for feedback to do something about it, or to check the box? And once you've got that feedback, what kind of actions are you putting in place is what's important.
Yogi, I have some interesting statistics with me here. I'll just read them out. So there was a survey conducted by Deloitte, and it found that 44% of millennials expect to leave their current employer within 2 years. 64% are concerned about the impact of automation on their jobs. Now, when you look at these statistics, how do you think an employer should go about creating a work environment that addresses some of these concerns and also makes it attractive for a millennial who's looking for job security, continuous learning, career development, at the same time leveraging automation and AI? How do you improve efficiency?
This is a very long question. Well, I think the statistics, first of all, are worldwide statistics. They don't pertain to India as such. If you take India, I have a feeling that it's a checkered kind of a situation. We're one of the fastest growing economies, and I don't think the problem is going to be that acute as we think we make it out. In terms of specifics, I think I live in a place called Parel, and there are 5 hospitals around where I live. They're called teaching hospitals. So I'd like to extend that analogy to companies also, where you have a model where people are practically learning whatever they need to learn rather than being put on the job straight, etc. I think teaching and learning is very, very important. And if the company can be made like a laboratory for a person to experiment, it would be great. The second point is that when you're looking for a job, you're looking for a good boss. I think it's extremely important to have a boss who's nurturing, the boss who's more of a coach. And I think it's important to rotate people around in a way where they think that they're getting more and more value in terms of whatever they are doing. So I think these are the few things that one can do. So if one is talking about the attrition problem as being extremely acute, I'd also like to ask what are companies doing in terms of dealing with recessionary pressures and so on. Not so much in the Indian context, but more in the international context, where there are large layoffs and so on. I think it's a two-way process, and loyalty has to be seen both ways. Finally, I'm sorry I'm a little longer than I should be. I think when you talk about a learning organization, I'd like to make a departure from domain-based learning, which I talked about, domain-based skills, to more of, should I say, leadership, non-cognitive skills, which are about interpersonal relationships, social intelligence, how to get along with people, and most important, critical thinking, which is all about recognizing assumptions, evaluating the arguments, and coming to decisions. This is in this very uncertain world, if one can pick up from a company one is working in, because it's not so difficult to teach Python and teach a software or a particular skill which is domain oriented, but very, very hard to impart skills which are life skills, which one loosely calls as soft skills. So if these can be imparted by a company, it would probably end up in lessening the attrition, because then it becomes an irresistible company to work for.
Rohan, there's another study that points out that 86% of job seekers want to avoid companies which have some sort of a negative perception associated with them. In today's day and age, it's very easy for one single negative review to go viral, and thereby damage control is that much more difficult. How do you think employees should now associate with their employers where there could be some sort of a negative perception or some sort of a viral review? How do you deal with that?
I think a lot of people in this room have asked me this question because being from Indeed, we'd also represent Glassdoor, and ratings interviews seems to be the business. But interestingly, we see it very differently, right? There is a lot of focus on the negative reviews that exist out there, and there's a lot of attention that it gets. If that was true, everybody on Glassdoor would have very low ratings. The average rating on Glassdoor is 3.7. The highest I typically see is about 4.5, for example. So if realistically, if only negative reviews existed out there, those ratings would actually be a lot lower. That being said, negative reviews do exist. Not every organization is perfect. They're going to come out. Someone's going to have a bad boss, a bad experience, or in some cases, even a bad day. And it's going to come out there. But the worst thing a company can do is damage control after the fact, right? We always talk about the fact that with these systems, with reviews, it's all about consistency from the very get-go. Always make sure that you have a plan in place to address them. Always have things to go out there and put. And the thing to remember most importantly about reviews is anonymously shouting into the internet is in many cases a last resort. Like nobody sits here, has a bad day and says, I'm going the first thing I'm going to do is get on the internet and complain about it. Most of us, of course, there are going to be a few outliers, but most of us are going to try and solve the problem in person. If it's a problem with your boss, we're going to go speak to them. If it's a problem with a policy, you're going to try and address it. And usually the negative review is an outcome of lack of channels for grievance. Like, they've tried everything, it hasn't worked, this is my last resort. I am going to go and shout into the wilderness, into the internet, so everyone can hear. And that's the real fact, right? Those negative reviews are an outcome of someone's bad perception or a bad day even sometimes. And if you have a channel within your organization where I can actually come and vent in a safe space, I think psychological safety as a concept really needs to pick up within the organizations. I need to feel safe enough to come and tell people that I am having a bad day, I'm having a problem, and this is what I want, or this is what I need. And if I'm unable to do that, it's going to happen. But once the review is out there, some of the ways I think we should be addressing them is respond to the review. Give them a source to reach out to someone and speak. Most importantly, don't let the review live on its own, because people are going to take it at its face value, and they're going to believe it. As I think there's a famous saying, and I'm probably going to quote this wrong, lies go around the world twice before truth can even put on its pants, right? So if you're not going to get out there and start talking and addressing the issues as quick as possible, it's going to live, and it's going to live longer. And most organizations at some point have got a negative review. Some have gone viral, but it's not the end of the world. And I think very few job seekers are going to take career decisions which could impact their life for 3 or 4 years based on one viral thing, or at least I hope so. If anyone is doing that, they shouldn't.
Devina, when it comes to employer branding, we heard a bit about what can be a safe strategy. How do you look at this? What kind of effort should go into it? And are there any methodologies or strategies that can be implemented to build a good reputation?
Okay. So, I think about a decade back, Virgin did an study around the people who were applying for jobs to them. And they found that there were about 6 lakh applicants they were getting, and they were making about 400-500 offers. And the entire focus of the recruitment team was on those 400-500 people who were going through the process, maybe 1,000 people going through the process and 400-500 getting the offers. What they did, interestingly, was a study to find out what happened to the balance, 6 lakhs people. And they found that they were losing market share. I mean, these were people who were not, for them, the recruitment was a black box. So there was this large universe of applicants who were disgruntled with the whole selection process, and therefore they stopped using Virgin's products. So there has and having been a recruiter myself, I'm telling you, I've been guilty of this. We tend to be very myopic on a very short-term fulfillment of a position. And there's a much larger universe that we overlook. I know I was talking to a couple of people before this session, and I know there are companies here who are being very progressive in how they're dealing with that applicant pipeline, and that's a very big piece. Because you're actually, and today technology allows you to do that, with AI and Gen AI and all that, you can give this customized feedback to say, here is where I think you didn't fit. And even if it's bad news, at least I appreciate that you told me something other than it's not, just going silent and I'm never hearing anything from you guys. So that's one piece. The second thing that, again, I'm, having done this and been guilty of it, I'm telling you, is from employer branding perspective, we go and, put out we're doing this, Zumba thing on our floor, and then we are having this offsite, and we are like this really cool place to work, and we oversell it, so that in Hindi they say, hati ka daat khane ka aur dikhane ka aur. And I actually did a study of this to say, what was the perception of applicants coming in? And they really had a very, very different perception of us, and then what were they experiencing? So don't oversell. While today, thanks to technology, there is tremendous amount of, the information asymmetry has reduced to a very large extent. There's a lot of transparency. But as recruiters, as talent acquisition, we tend to, oversell all the great stuff, and people come in and get disillusioned, which is also not a problem you want, because you're just passing the problem on to your HR colleague to deal with, which is not fair. I think these are just two things that I'd like to call out on employer branding.
Sunita, what are some lessons you've learned over the years when it comes to employer branding?
I like what Rohan said, on the psychological safety bit, and the fact that I feel safe to call out if I see something wrong. And at least, at least as far as my career is concerned, this is my 28th year in Wipro. And, every year I've seen that consistent behavior in terms of call a spade a spade. You can knock on any door and you will be heard, right? So I think that goes a long way in terms of building that trust. That goes a long way in terms of even training the managers from the time they get into the organization, that these are the behaviors that we want you to display, and these are the behaviors that all employees are expected. So, we started something called the 5 habits. As trivial or as simple as it may sound, it's extremely difficult to put in practice. Example, being responsive, being respectful, always communicating, building trust, demonstrating stewardship. So I think these are the basics that we focus on time and again to say, hey, if you see one, it starts with you, right? So don't try to point your fingers at everybody else is wrong, but I'm right. So one is self-change. And 2, more importantly, is call it out when you see something is wrong. And for that, I think the psychological safety is important for you to kind of build. Apart from that, of course, in terms of the brand, I'm again going back to what is it that I'm experiencing of the brand here? And by that token, what's most important to me? It is my career growth, right? And if it is my career growth, then like the panelist spoke, it's no more about my manager telling me what my next role should be, as much as me experiencing what is available. So we have something called I Aspire, which is my aspiration, and how am I matching that with what's available, right? So I think these things are important if you really want to build the career of that individual, rather than saying, hey, here's a job, do it for 2 years, and then after that, if you like it or not, it's your problem. Over here, it's more of nurturing and building on what you want to do next. And by that token, the opportunity. So again, going back to tech, I don't think we would have been able to do this in terms of showing all the job opportunities within to an individual and saying, hey, it's your choice, in terms of what you want to do next and how is it that you're going to be qualifying for that job. And by the way, you've applied for it, you've got rejected, like, Debolina spoke about an external candidate, including internal. Why is it that you never got that job? Right? So if you're not able to give that feedback in terms of what's the gap, and by the way, if this is the gap, then this is the kind of programs that you need to attend to kind of build that gap. So I think there's enough and more pieces to it, and until and unless you plug each of those, I don't think you will complete the cycle.
With all these complexities, let's add AI to the equation. And there is a report by Gartner that goes on to say that nearly 75% of the recruitment process will depend very closely on AI tools and AI metrics. Yogi, you have seen a large part of how HR has evolved 30, 35 years. How do you think managers, HR managers, should use AI during recruitment? What are some pitfalls that they should be aware of and avoid?
There are 1 in 188 cognitive biases. And I think if HR people are cognizant about what are the cognitive biases that they can fall as a trap for, it's very, very important. Because the algorithm which you make for the AI can have that baked in. There is a very interesting software called Compass, which is being used in America for deciding which prisoners should get parole and which prisoners should not get parole. And when they ran an algorithm, the test, in order to check whether there were biases baked or not, they found that colored people were definitely being discriminated against. So it's extremely important for the algo to be examined, re-examined. And I think the specific skill that one requires for this is critical thinking, and to get a data lake of information from various sources so that you can test and retest to make sure that your algo is fair. Cognitive biases we are in a minefield of cognitive biases. We have something called the confirmation bias, the anchoring bias, the hindsight bias, the halo effect, the horn effect. So all these are something that can affect your recruitment very badly. And I think in today's context, one has to be extremely careful. If you take the Wechsler's adult intelligence scale, which is used as an intelligence test, it is not exactly culture free. How can you have a test which asks you about how many stripes and stars does the American flag have? Or how many spokes does the Ashoka wheel have? So I think it's very important to select tests. I don't want to name other tests, whether they're Hogan or whatever, which are culture free, and therefore these cognitive biases are avoided.
Rohan, what are you wary of? What are you cautious of? And based on your interactions, what do you think are some pitfalls that can be avoided?
Uh, just to add to what Mr. Yogi was saying about biases, and the weirdest way human biases appear as well. Similar to what he was saying, there was a study on sentencing in America on sentencing that a group of judges were doing after thing. If you were sentenced after lunch, you got a better sentence than before lunch. Yes, from Daniel Kahneman. So essentially, the weirdest way for biases to exist, and that's the biggest danger, right? AI uses data to predict. Data is from humans. We are more biased than anything, and the unconscious biases are the ones you don't even know you have. That's what makes it even worse. And you can see it's already affecting us day to day. And for me, it was the silliest way I got affected. I, of course, share my Netflix with my mother. She clicked on the wrong profile, and suddenly I started getting recommended shows I don't watch at all. I'm like, why? Suddenly it's not a thing. So she was clicking on the wrong profile and watching shows on mine. So I was thinking, so obviously it's a small thing and it barely affected me, but you can already see, right? Every day there is AI serving things up to us and confirming our biases. And there's all this talk of echo chambers that we exist in, right? And can you imagine it being implemented in something as important as a job, right? It is, the job search process is the most intimate, most at times quite difficult thing for a person to do. When you speak to people, they say it's the one thing they don't even speak with their spouses sometimes, right? Because it's that intimate. Like you've heard stories of people who lose jobs who don't even tell at home, right? Because they're so panicked about it. And once we put AI into that, we have to be very careful, right? And for example, in Indeed, we do use a lot of artificial intelligence for matching, for smart sourcing. You've heard about that. And we use it to put jobs and job seekers together. But we're not doing it in a silo. We have a responsible AI team whose only job is to look at every product that we build and match it to real world scenarios and see if it's actually matching what would happen in a real world scenario. And they have a lot of power to say, this is not right. Because particularly when you start thinking about how AI is being used, it is being used to process large volumes, and invariably large volume are masses. And it's very funny, when we spoke to job seekers, employers, everyone in India, India was the most optimistic about artificial intelligence. Like Indians in general, when we spoke to a lot of folks all over the world, Indians were very optimistic about artificial intelligence. But at the same time, when you ask them, there was a dichotomy. They're like, but I don't want to be processed by artificial intelligence. Like they don't want to be put through a system where a technology judges them. There is that dichotomy. We believe it's going to exist and it's going to come. So we have to be very careful on how we put this together. And any organization that is putting it out there typically puts it out there with efficiencies in mind. They are not thinking about the potential ethical implications of putting it out there. So that's what we are trying to do as well. Indeed, if we are putting something out there, is it responsible AI? Are we going to affect a demographic just by putting this out there? And I think all organizations should start thinking in that lines. And bias is easy to talk, it's easy to talk about, but sometimes efficiency might trump it. And that's where we need to be careful.
By the way, there's an AI Act 2024, which is very important to take note of, which provides the checks and balances against biases.
Against this backdrop, Deblina, what are some interesting trends you are picking up based on your interactions? How do you think the industry is working towards these pitfalls, just to make sure that there's more transparency and there is more focus on ethics in the process?
I don't know about the ethics in the process. See, where I see, and it's really interesting because AI has really helped in the passive candidate search, undoubtedly, you know. And it's amazing. I remember this, I don't know if it's still there, but this company called Belong, which did this whole, it would stitch together recommended a profile and send a mail from from the recruiter's desk, which is highly personalized. Rohan saw you at this, this talk, and you did a great job, and let's meet. Found out that you like Starbucks, and send you a very personalized. Let's meet at Starbucks. So it's very flattering that it's all about you and all of that. So that passive talent search thing, but it's coming from a bot, right? And today, thanks to Gen AI and AI, candidates have also got onto that bandwagon. I mean, I was talking to some of our students, right? And they are getting recommendations on how they should change their resume to apply to particular jobs. And I think this makes it all scary, right? And so eventually now recruiters have to up their game, and this is where human judgment is going to come in, because candidates are also getting onto the whole AI thing, right? They know what a JD is expecting, and so my resume is getting tweaked to that. So who's going to be sitting and making that fit now? So then eventually, beyond, after the two AIs battle it out, it's going to be the human judgment, right? So, and I think this ethics part of it is a little crazy. I remember, when I was in Wipro at that time, we had, I think, 6 or 8% of background verification failures. This was at that point of time. I don't know what the statistic is now today. I mean, I think the audience members would be able to tell us what's the reality. I wonder actually where the trend is going with all this AI stuff coming in. It's a little scary on both sides.
It's almost like two AI. My AI is better than yours.
One comment, I don't want to be overcritical about it, but my suspicion is HR is lagging behind AI. In the sense, if AI has a platform to offer, which is, let's say, a recommendatory platform like LinkedIn or Indeed or whatever it is, it's the platform or it's the AI brilliance that comes first, and then it's the HR imagination that goes to envelop and embrace it. It should be the other way around.
Mm-hmm. On that note, we'll wrap this conversation. Very interesting conversation we've had. Thank you so much for being a fantastic audience. Thank you, Rohan. Thank you, Yogi. Thank you, Deblina. Thank you, Sunita.
Forbes India and Indeed present Top 30 Talent Leaders of 2024.